The eviction notice crumpled in Penelope Ashworth's trembling hand as she stared at the imposing iron gates of Ravens Hollow estate. 24 hours. That's all she'd had to find a new job, a new home, a new life for her and Sophia. The classified ad had been almost too good to be true: live-in maid position, room and board included, start immediately. No questions asked. She should have known there'd be a catch. The estate loomed before her like something from a Gothic novel, all dark stone and towering windows that seemed to watch her every move. Pine trees pressed close on all sides, their shadows long and deep even in the afternoon sun. Penelope adjusted her grip on Sophia's small hand and the single suitcase that held everything they owned. "Mommy, it looks like a castle," Sophia whispered, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and worry. "A beautiful castle," Penelope murmured, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Beautiful, yes. But also isolated. Remote. The kind of place where people could disappear and no one would think to look for them. Stop it. She couldn't afford doubt now. Not when her daughter's stability depended on this job working out. The front door opened before she could knock. A stern-faced woman in her 60s appeared, silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing a crisp black dress that screamed head housekeeper. "Ms. Ashworth, I presume?" "I'm Mrs. Pemberton. Mr. Ravens Hollow is occupied with business. I'll show you to your quarters and explain your duties." Penelope nodded, swallowing her questions. In her experience, rich men were either never home or never wanted to be bothered. Either way suited her fine. She just needed to keep her head down, do her work, and build a nest egg for Sophia's future. Mrs. Pemberton led them through marble halls lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men and women, their eyes seeming to follow Penelope's progress. The house felt enormous and empty, sounds echoing strangely in the vast spaces. Sophia pressed closer to her mother's side with each step. "The master's son doesn't like strangers," Mrs. Pemberton said without preamble as they climbed a grand staircase. "Best to keep your distance. He's difficult." Penelope's maternal instincts prickled. "How old is he?" 8. "But Mr. Ravens Hollow handles all matters concerning the boy. Your job is to clean, not interfere." The dismissive tone rankled, but Penelope bit her tongue. She'd worked for enough wealthy families to know the drill. Children were often treated more like inconvenient accessories than actual human beings. Their rooms were small but comfortable, tucked away in what had clearly once been servants' quarters. A bedroom for each of them, with a shared bathroom. Sophia immediately claimed the window seat in her room, chattering about the view of the gardens below. "I'll let you settle in," Mrs. Pemberton said. "Dinner is at 6. The boy eats separately." After she left, Penelope sank onto her narrow bed and finally let herself breathe. They had a roof over their heads. Food would be provided. Sophia could have stability while Penelope figured out their next move. A high-pitched shriek shattered the quiet. Penelope shot to her feet, every mother's instinct in her body screaming alarm. The sound came again, raw, desperate, filled with a kind of anguish that made her heart clench. "Stay here," she told Sophia, who was already moving toward the window. "Mommy, there's a boy in the garden. He's crying." Penelope looked out the window. Below, in what appeared to be a formal garden, a small figure sat curled in a ball on the grass. Even from this distance, she could see he was rocking back and forth, his hands pressed over his ears. The shriek came again, and Penelope was moving before she'd made a conscious decision. She raced down the stairs, through the house, and out into the garden. As she got closer, she could hear it, the sound of construction equipment from somewhere beyond the tree line. Jackhammers, diesel engines, the beep of machinery backing up. The boy couldn't be more than 8, just as Mrs. Pemberton had said. Dark hair, pale skin, wearing expensive clothes that were now grass-stained and wrinkled. He was beautiful in the way children often were, but his face was contorted in distress, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Hey," Penelope said softly, approaching slowly. "Hey, sweetheart." He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her presence. The construction noise seemed to crescendo, and his rocking became more frantic. Penelope had seen this before. Sophia's friend Jamie had autism, and Penelope had learned techniques for helping during overwhelming moments. She sat down on the grass a few feet away from the boy, close enough to be present but far enough to not feel threatening. "I know it's loud," she said in the same calm voice she used with Sophia when thunderstorms made her anxious. "Sometimes the world gets too much, doesn't it?" The boy's rocking slowed slightly. Penelope began to hum softly, a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her. The melody was simple, repetitive, soothing. She'd learned that familiar patterns could help when everything else felt chaotic. Gradually, the boy's breathing began to even out. His hands loosened slightly over his ears. "My name is Penelope," she said, still humming between words. "I just moved here today with my daughter Sophia. She's 7, almost exactly your age." The construction noise began to fade as the workers apparently took a break. In the growing quiet, Penelope's humming became more audible. The boy finally looked up, and Penelope's heart squeezed at the sight of his tear-stained face and enormous dark eyes. "What's your name?" she asked gently. For a long moment, she didn't think he would answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Oliver." "That's a strong name." Like Oliver Aurelius, he was a Roman emperor, but also a philosopher. He wrote about finding peace even when the world around you is difficult. Oliver studied her with an intensity that seemed far beyond his years. "Do you know about the stars?" Penelope smiled. "A little." "Do you?" "They're quiet," he said seriously. "Even when they're exploding, we can't hear them because sound doesn't travel in space." "That sounds peaceful." Oliver nodded gravely. "I like quiet things." They sat together in the garden as the shadows lengthened, Penelope asking gentle questions about his interests while being careful not to push. He told her about constellations, about the books he read, about how sound sometimes felt like they were inside his head. Penelope lost track of time until she heard footsteps on the garden path. She looked up to see a man approaching, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive suit despite the late hour. Dark hair with silver at the temples, strong jaw, and the kind of presence that seemed to command attention even in silence. He had Oliver's eyes, but where the boy's were soft and vulnerable, this man's were hard as stone. "Oliver." His voice was deep, controlled. "You know you're not supposed to be out here when they're working." Penelope stood slowly, brushing grass from her skirt. "The construction stopped about 20 minutes ago. We were just talking about stars." The man's gaze shifted to her, and Penelope felt pinned like a butterfly under glass. There was something almost inhuman about the intensity of his stare, something that made her pulse quicken for reasons she couldn't name. "You must be the new maid," he said finally. "I'm Sebastian Ravenshollow." "Penelope Ashworth." She kept her voice steady despite the way he was looking at her, like he was seeing something unexpected, something that disturbed him. Oliver had gone quiet again, shrinking in on himself under his father's attention. The change in the boy's demeanor sparked anger in Penelope's chest. "Oliver was having a difficult time with the noise," she said carefully. "Sometimes children just need someone to sit with them until the world feels manageable again." Something flickered in Sebastian's eyes, surprise, maybe, or something deeper she couldn't read. "I see." He looked at his son, and Penelope caught a flash of something that might have been pain before his expression shuddered again. "Oliver, go inside. Mrs. Pemberton will give you dinner." The boy scrambled to his feet without a word and hurried toward the house, not looking back. Penelope watched him go, her heart aching for the obvious distance between father and son. When she turned back to Sebastian, she found him still staring at her with that unnerving intensity. "In the future," he said quietly, "my son's care is not your concern." The dismissal was clear, but Penelope had never been good at backing down when children were involved. "Of course, Mr. Ravenshollow. I just couldn't ignore a child in distress." "No," he said after a long moment, and there was something almost wondering in his voice. "I don't suppose you could." He turned and walked away, leaving Penelope alone in the gathering dusk, wondering what she'd gotten herself and Sophia into. From his office window 3 stories above, Sebastian Ravenshollow watched the woman in his garden and felt the first crack in the walls around his heart. For 3 years, nothing had touched him. Nothing had moved him. He'd buried his capacity for feeling along with his mate, determined never to be vulnerable again. But watching this stranger, this human, calm his son with such natural grace, such instinctive understanding, something long dormant stirred in his chest. Something dangerous. Something he couldn't afford to feel. But as Penelope Ashworth disappeared into the house below, Sebastian found himself pressing a hand to the glass, already knowing it was too late. Chapter 2. 3 weeks into her employment at Ravenshollow Estate, Penelope had established a routine that worked around the invisible barriers everyone seemed to maintain. She cleaned in the early morning hours when the house was quiet, took her meals with Sophia in their small quarters, and tried to ignore the way Sebastian Ravenshollow appeared and disappeared like a ghost in his own home. The only constant was Oliver. Every afternoon, she found him in the library, a vast room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and windows that let in pools of golden light. He would be curled in the same leather chair, reading books that seemed far too advanced for an 8-year-old, completely absorbed in worlds where emperors studied philosophy and stars burned in perfect silence. "What are you reading today?" Penelope asked, settling into the chair across from him with her dust cloth. Oliver held up a thick volume. "It's about black holes. Did you know that time moves differently near them? If you fell into one, you'd experience time normally, but everyone watching would see you slow down until you froze at the event horizon." Penelope paused in her dusting. The boy's vocabulary and grasp of complex concepts never ceased to amaze her. "That sounds lonely." "Everything in space is lonely," Oliver said matter-of-factly. "Stars are born alone, live alone, and die alone. Even when they're in galaxies with billions of other stars, they're still separated by impossible distances." The melancholy in his voice made Penelope's chest tighten. "But they're not really alone, are they? They're all connected by gravity, all part of something bigger. And their light reaches each other across all that distance." Oliver considered this, his dark eyes serious. "I never thought about it that way." "Sometimes we just need a different perspective," Penelope said gently. It was during these quiet conversations that Penelope learned about Oliver's world. How he'd been reading since he was 4, how he memorized star charts the way other children memorized song lyrics, how he hadn't spoken to his father since his mother died when he was 5. "He doesn't understand," Oliver had whispered one day when Penelope asked about Sebastian. "He thinks I'm broken because I'm not like other kids. Because I need things to be quiet and predictable." Penelope's heart had nearly shattered. "You're not broken, sweetheart. You're just different, and different can be wonderful." But she was beginning to understand the scope of the problem when Mrs. Pemberton cornered her in the kitchen one morning. "You're getting too close to the boy," the older woman said bluntly, her accent crisp with disapproval. "It's not your place." Penelope continued kneading the bread dough she'd started for Sophia's lunch. "I'm just being kind to a child who seems lonely." "Kind?" Mrs. Pemberton snorted. "The last 3 maids thought they could help too. All of them quit within a month when they couldn't handle his episodes. The screaming, the meltdowns when things don't go exactly as he expects. You haven't seen him at his worst yet." "Episodes?" Penelope's hands stilled in the dough. "You mean when he gets overwhelmed?" "I mean when he destroys furniture and screams for hours because someone moved his books or the gardeners used different equipment. The boy is disturbed, and Mr. Ravenshollow won't hear of getting him proper help." Penelope bit back her sharp response. She'd witnessed Oliver's distress in the garden, had seen how quickly he could be overwhelmed by sensory input. But calling him disturbed? That was ignorance, pure and simple. Has anyone ever tried actually listening to what he needs? Penelope asked carefully. Mrs. Pemberton's expression hardened. What he needs is discipline and structure, not coddling. Mr. Ravenshollow is too soft on him as it is. Soft? Penelope almost laughed. If Sebastian Ravenshallow's cold distance from his son was considered soft, she'd hate to see what strict looked like. That afternoon, Penelope found Oliver in the library as usual, but something was wrong. His hands shook as he turned the pages of his book, and she could see the tension in his small shoulders. "What's happening today?" she asked, settling into her chair. "The men are coming back," Oliver whispered. "To cut down more trees. Mrs. Pemberton said they'll be using chainsaws all afternoon." Penelope's stomach dropped. The sound of chainsaws would be 1,000 times worse than the construction equipment that had sent Oliver into a meltdown on her first day. "Where will you go when they start?" she asked. Oliver's eyes filled with tears. "There's nowhere. Every room in the house, I can still hear it. It gets inside my head and won't stop." Without thinking, Penelope reached for her phone and did a quick search. Noise-canceling headphones for children. She found several options with excellent reviews, available for next-day delivery. The sound of chainsaws roaring to life outside made Oliver flinch so hard he dropped his book. Penelope made her decision. She found Sebastian in his office an hour later, after Oliver had fled to his room with his hands pressed over his ears and tears streaming down his face. The chainsaws were still going, a mechanical scream that seemed to penetrate every corner of the house. Sebastian looked up from his computer as she knocked, his expression immediately guarded. "Ms. Ashworth. Is there a problem with your work?" "There's a problem with your son." His jaw tightened. "I told you before. He's upstairs, terrified and overwhelmed, because no one in this house seems to understand that some children process sound differently." Penelope stepped fully into the room, her temper barely in check. "I'd like to order him noise-canceling headphones. They're $30 and could be here tomorrow." Sebastian stood slowly, his full height imposing even across the width of his desk. "You want to buy my son headphones?" "I want to buy a child relief from suffering that could be easily prevented." "No." The flat refusal hit Penelope like a slap. "No. Oliver needs to learn to cope with the real world, not hide from it." Sebastian's voice was controlled, but Penelope caught the flash of something raw in his eyes. "I won't have him become more dependent on accommodations that make him weaker." "Weaker?" Penelope stared at him in disbelief. "You think helping a child manage sensory overload makes him weak?" "I think coddling him won't prepare him for life." "This isn't coddling, it's basic human compassion." Penelope's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Would you refuse glasses to a child who couldn't see? Would you tell a diabetic child that insulin shots were making them weak?" Sebastian's face went stone cold. "That's different." "How? How is it different?" "Because," he stopped abruptly, his hands clenching at his sides. Penelope waited, watching the war that played out across his features. When he didn't continue, she pressed forward. "Because what?" "Because Oliver's needs aren't visible enough? Because accommodating them would mean admitting that your son is different, and that scares you?" "Enough." The word came out as nearly a growl, and for a moment, Penelope could have sworn she saw something inhuman flicker in Sebastian's eyes. "You don't understand what's at stake here." "Then explain it to me." They stared at each other across the room, tension crackling between them like electricity. Outside, the chainsaws continued their relentless assault, and Penelope thought of Oliver alone in his room, suffering. "My son has to be strong," Sebastian said finally, his voice rough. "Stronger than other children. The world he'll inherit doesn't have room for weakness." "And you think needing help is weakness?" "I think," he turned away, running a hand through his dark hair. "I think I've already failed him enough." The admission was so quiet, so broken, that Penelope's anger dissolved into something deeper. She saw it then, the guilt that ate at him, the fear that he was somehow responsible for his son's struggles. "You haven't failed him," she said softly. "But you are failing him now, by letting your pride come before his needs." Sebastian's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know that child is brilliant and sensitive and deserves a father who sees his differences as gifts, not flaws." Penelope moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. "I know that love sometimes means admitting we don't have all the answers." "Love?" Sebastian laughed, but there was no humor in it. Love got his mother killed. Love makes you vulnerable, makes you weak when strength is the only thing that matters. Penelope's heart ached for him, for the pain he carried like armor. Is that what you're teaching Oliver? That love is dangerous? Sebastian finally turned to face her, and Penelope saw the raw grief in his expression before he shuddered it away. I'm teaching him to survive. No, Penelope said quietly. You're teaching him that he's not worth loving as he is. The words hung between them like a challenge. Sebastian's face went white, then flushed with anger. Get out, he said, his voice deadly quiet. And stay away from my son. Penelope held his gaze for a long moment, seeing the fear and pain he tried so hard to hide. Then she nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. I'll order the headphones anyway. If you want to take them away from him, that's your choice. But I won't stand by and watch a child suffer when I can help. She left him standing in his office, surrounded by the noise that was tearing his son apart. That night, Penelope's dreams were full of wolves. She ran through dark forests on 4 legs, her senses sharp and wild. She could smell fear and anger and something else, something that called to her like a half-remembered song. In the dream, she was hunting, but she couldn't tell if she was predator or prey. She woke with her heart racing and the taste of copper in her mouth. The dreams had started a few days after arriving at the estate, strange and vivid in a way that left her feeling unsettled. She'd always been a light sleeper, but lately, every sound seemed amplified. She could hear Sophia's breathing from the next room, could distinguish between the footsteps of different staff members in the hallway outside. This morning, she could swear she heard Oliver crying from 3 floors below. Penelope dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, following instincts she didn't understand. She found Oliver in the kitchen, sitting at the small staff table with tears streaming down his face. Mrs. Pemberton was nowhere to be seen. Sweetheart, what's wrong? Penelope knelt beside his chair. The headphones came, Oliver whispered, pointing to a package on the counter. But father took them away. He said I have to learn to be stronger. Penelope's heart clenched. She'd hoped Sebastian might reconsider, might put his son's well-being above his pride. Apparently, she'd been wrong. I'm sorry, she whispered, pulling Oliver into a gentle hug. I'm so sorry. They sat together in the quiet kitchen as dawn broke outside the windows, Penelope holding a broken-hearted little boy while her own heart broke for him. From the doorway, Sebastian watched them and felt the crack in his chest widen. He'd stood there for several minutes, drawn by his son's distress and held frozen by the sight of Penelope's natural tenderness. 3 years ago, he'd made a choice to lock away everything soft in himself, everything vulnerable. It was the only way to lead, the only way to protect what remained of his family and his pack. But watching Penelope hold his son, seeing the way Oliver melted into her embrace, Sebastian wondered if he'd protected his boy right into isolation. The thought terrified him almost as much as the growing certainty that Penelope Ashworth was far more than she appeared to be. Her scent was wrong for a human, too complex, too layered with something wild that called to the wolf in him. And that was a complication he couldn't afford. Not when pack tensions were rising, when reports came in daily of Crimson Moon wolves testing their borders. Not when his leadership was already questioned by those who thought grief had made him weak. Sebastian turned away from the kitchen, from the sight of his son finding comfort in a stranger's arms, and walked back to his office to deal with the latest territorial violations. Behind him, Penelope's voice drifted down the hall as she hummed softly to Oliver, the same lullaby she'd used in the garden. The melody followed Sebastian like a ghost, beautiful and haunting and dangerous as everything else about the woman who was rapidly becoming the biggest threat to the walls around his heart. Chapter 3. The astronomy book was ancient, its leather binding cracked with age and gold lettering worn nearly smooth. Oliver held it like a treasure as he whispered to Penelope about binary stars, 2 suns locked in an eternal dance around each other. They're so close they share the same atmosphere, he said, his voice barely audible in the library's afternoon quiet. But sometimes one star steals material from the other until it explodes. Penelope looked up from organizing the lower shelves, struck by the melancholy in his tone. That sounds sad. It is. The smaller star dies, but the bigger one keeps burning for billions of years, alone. Oliver traced a constellation diagram with his finger. Do you think it remembers what it was like to have a companion? The question was so loaded with meaning that Penelope set down her dust cloth and moved to sit across from him. Over the past 2 weeks since the headphone incident, Oliver had begun opening up to her in whispers and fragments, sharing thoughts too deep for a child his age to carry alone. I think, Penelope said carefully, that even when someone is gone, the love they shared doesn't disappear. It becomes part of who the survivor is. Oliver's dark eyes, so like his father's, filled with tears. But what if the smaller star caused the explosion? What if it was the smaller star's fault that everything went wrong? Penelope's heart clenched with understanding. She'd wondered when this would come up, when Oliver would voice the terrible guilt she'd sensed him carrying. Oh, sweetheart, she said softly. Is this about your mother? Oliver nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. Mrs. Pemberton told me once that Mama died because having me was too hard for her body. That I was complicated, even before I was born. Penelope wanted to find Mrs. Pemberton and shake her until her teeth rattled. What kind of adult told a child such a devastating thing? Oliver, look at me. Penelope waited until his eyes met hers. Your mother's death was not your fault. Complications during childbirth happen sometimes, and they're never, ever the baby's fault. You didn't choose to be born, and you didn't cause what happened to her. But if I had been normal. You are normal. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. Penelope's voice was fierce with conviction. Your mother loved you before you were born, and she would love everything about who you are now. The way you think, the way you see the world, your brilliant mind, none of that is wrong or broken. Oliver was crying harder now, 3 years of buried guilt pouring out of him. Father doesn't think so. He can barely look at me. Your father is hurting too, Penelope said gently. Sometimes when adults are in pain, they don't know how to show love properly. But that doesn't mean the love isn't there. From the doorway, Sebastian stood frozen, his hand gripping the frame so tightly the wood groaned under the pressure. He'd come looking for a book on territorial law, but Penelope's words had stopped him cold. His son thought he was responsible for Isabella's death. The knowledge hit Sebastian like a physical blow. For 3 years, he'd been so consumed by his own guilt and grief that he'd never considered Oliver might be carrying the same burden. He'd been so afraid of his own emotions, so terrified of the vulnerability that came with loving someone, that he'd left his child to suffer alone. I miss her, Oliver whispered to Penelope. I don't remember her, but I miss her anyway. Is that strange? No, sweetheart. Love doesn't need memory to exist. You can miss someone you never got the chance to know. Sebastian closed his eyes, remembering Isabella's excitement about their baby, how she'd talked to her growing belly every night. She'd already loved Oliver completely before he'd drawn his first breath, and she would have defended him fiercely against anyone who suggested he was anything less than perfect. Would you like to know about her? Penelope asked Oliver. I could ask Mrs. Pemberton for photo albums, or maybe your father has stories he could share. He doesn't talk about her, Oliver said sadly. He doesn't talk about anything important. The casual dismissal of his efforts to protect his son stung, but Sebastian couldn't deny the truth in it. In trying to shield Oliver from his own pain, he'd also shielded him from the joy of knowing about Isabella. Sebastian backed away from the doorway, his mind reeling. He needed time to process this, to figure out how to bridge the chasm he'd created between himself and his son. Penelope. Penelope, where are you? Sophia's voice echoed through the halls, bright with excitement. Penelope smiled, recognizing the tone that meant her daughter had discovered something wonderful. In here, Mija. Sophia burst into the library like a small whirlwind, her dark curls escaping from their braids and her cheeks flushed with adventure. She stopped short when she saw Oliver, her natural shyness kicking in. Sophia, this is Oliver, Penelope said. Oliver, my daughter Sophia. Sophia studied Oliver with the serious intensity that 7-year-olds brought to important decisions. Are you the boy who knows about stars? Oliver blinked in surprise. Yes. Mama told me you're really smart about space stuff. I like space too, but I'm better with animals. Sophia's shyness evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. Do you want to see what I found in the gardens? There's a whole family of rabbits living under the rose bushes, and the babies are tiny and perfect. Okay, Oliver said, looking uncertainly at Penelope. Go on, Penelope encouraged. Fresh air will do you both good. She watched from the library window as Sophia led Oliver through the gardens, chattering about everything from rabbit behavior to her theory that squirrels were actually tiny alien scouts. Oliver listened with growing fascination, occasionally asking questions that made Sophia beam with pride. By the time they settled on a bench near the rose bushes, they were deep in conversation about whether animals could see the same stars humans could, and if they made up their own constellations. Different eyes see different things, Oliver said thoughtfully. Eagles can see ultraviolet light, and some butterflies can see colors we don't have names for. So maybe rabbits look up at night and see completely different pictures in the stars, Sophia said excitedly. Maybe they see giant carrots instead of hunters and princesses. Oliver laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since Penelope had known him. The sound was pure joy, and it made her heart swell. Penelope. She turned to find Sebastian standing behind her, his expression unreadable. He moved to the window, watching his son with an intensity that made the air feel charged. He's different with your daughter, Sebastian observed. Children understand each other in ways adults often miss, Penelope said carefully. Sophia has always been drawn to kids who think differently than others. She says they're more interesting. More interesting than normal children? There's no such thing as normal children, Mr. Ravenshollow. There are just children who've learned to hide their differences and children who haven't. Sebastian was quiet for a long moment, watching Oliver explain something that involved elaborate hand gestures while Sophia nodded seriously. What did you mean, he said finally, when you told Oliver that love doesn't need memory to exist? Penelope glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in the question. I meant that some connections transcend experience. Sophia mourned her father even though she was too young to remember him when he died. Love creates bonds that exist beyond our conscious understanding. You were married? For 3 years. Miguel died when Sophia was 18 months old. Cancer. Penelope's voice was steady, but Sebastian caught the thread of old pain beneath it. Sophia asks about him sometimes, wants to know if he would have been proud of her, if he would have liked her drawings or her stories. The love is real even without the memories to support it. Sebastian absorbed this, thinking of all the times Oliver had asked careful questions about Isabella, questions Sebastian had deflected or ignored, too afraid of his own grief to share hers. I don't know how to talk to him about her, Sebastian admitted quietly. Start with the happy things, Penelope suggested. The way she laughed, her favorite foods, what she was looking forward to about being his mother. Children need to know they were wanted, that their existence brought joy. Outside, Oliver was pointing out constellations to Sophia even though it was still daylight, using his hands to map invisible stars. Sophia was matching his enthusiasm, asking rapid-fire questions about galaxies and black holes. They're good for each other, Penelope said. Yes. Sebastian's voice was rough. They are. That evening, Penelope found both children on the estate's back terrace, Sophia's telescope, a birthday gift from Penelope's parents, set up between them. Oliver was adjusting the eyepiece with the careful precision of someone who'd done extensive research on proper telescope usage. Did you know, Oliver was saying, that light pollution makes it hard to see most stars? But out here, away from the city, we can see thousands more. Can we see planets? Sophia asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Jupiter should be visible tonight. It'll look like a bright star, but it's actually a giant gas planet with over 70 moons. Penelope smiled, settling into a nearby chair to watch their impromptu astronomy lesson. She didn't notice Sebastian approaching until his shadow fell across the terrace. Both children looked up, and Penelope saw Oliver immediately tense, his animation fading into the careful blankness he wore around his father. Don't stop, Sebastian said quietly. I was curious about what you're seeing up there. Oliver hesitated, clearly torn between his desire to share his passion and his uncertainty about his father's interest. Sophia, bless her heart, had no such reservations. Oliver is teaching me about Jupiter. Did you know it's so big you could fit all the other planets inside it? And it has a storm that's been going on for hundreds of years. I didn't know that, Sebastian said, his attention focused on his son. Oliver, would you show me? The next few minutes were tentative but magical. Oliver, encouraged by Sophia's enthusiasm and Penelope's presence, began to open up about his favorite celestial objects. Sebastian listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was truly paying attention. The moon tonight is waxing gibbous, Oliver explained, his voice gaining confidence. That means it's more than half full but not completely full yet. In 3 days, it'll be at its fullest. And werewolves howl at the full moon, Sophia added matter-of-factly. But that's just in stories. Real wolves howl to communicate with their pack, not because of the moon. Penelope noticed Sebastian go very still at Sophia's innocent comment, his expression becoming carefully neutral. That's right, Oliver said. Wolves are actually very social animals. They have complex family structures and communication systems. Like people families, Sophia said. Sometimes complicated, but still important. The simple wisdom in her words seemed to hang in the air. Sebastian glanced at Penelope, and she saw something shift in his expression, a recognition, perhaps, of what he'd been missing. They spent the next hour taking turns at the telescope, Sebastian's presence gradually becoming less tense as Oliver warmed to having an interested audience for his knowledge. Penelope watched the tentative rebuilding of connection between father and son with growing hope. It was Oliver who suggested they make stargazing a regular evening activity, and Sebastian who agreed without hesitation. Tomorrow night? Sebastian asked. If the weather's clear, Oliver said, then added shyly, maybe you could tell us about some of the business trips you take. The different places you've seen. I'd like that, Sebastian said, and Penelope could hear the emotion he was trying to control. Later, after the children were in bed, Penelope was cleaning up the kitchen when she sensed someone behind her. She turned to find a man she'd never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, with sandy hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about her. Miss Ashworth, he said, his voice carrying an authority that made her instantly wary. I'm Vance Sterling. I work security for Mr. Raven's Hollow. Penelope set down the dish towel, her instincts prickling with danger. Is there a problem? That depends on you. Vance moved closer, not quite threatening but definitely intimidating. I've been watching you with the boy. Getting very involved in family matters that don't concern you. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you do. Vance's smile was sharp. See, I know about women like you. Pretty, down on your luck, looking for a wealthy man to solve your problems. But Oliver Raven's Hollow isn't just any rich man's son. He's special. And his father is a man with very specific responsibilities. The threat in his voice was unmistakable, even if Penelope didn't understand the full context. I'm here to do a job, Penelope said steadily. Nothing more. Good. Keep it that way. Vance leaned closer, and Penelope caught a scent that was wrong somehow, wild and dangerous in a way that made her skin crawl. Because if I think you're becoming a problem, if I think you're getting ideas above your station, I'll make sure you and your daughter find new accommodations. Permanently. Penelope's protective instincts flared. Are you threatening my child? I'm explaining reality, Vance said smoothly. This is a very exclusive household with very particular customs. Outsiders who don't understand their place can find themselves in situations they're not equipped to handle. Before Penelope could respond, Vance was gone, melting into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. Penelope stood alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding and her hands shaking. Whatever was really going on at Raven's Hollow estate, she was beginning to understand that she'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple job. But when she thought of Oliver's shy smile during their stargazing session, of the way Sebastian had listened to his son with growing wonder, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not yet. Not when she was finally seeing the man behind Sebastian's walls, and not when Oliver was beginning to heal. Even if staying meant facing threats she didn't fully understand. Chapter 4. The voices coming from Sebastian's office were raised in anger, and Penelope could hear them from 3 floors away. She'd been trying to ignore the heated discussion for the past hour, but her newly heightened hearing made it impossible to block out completely. Cannot continue to allow these incursions, a man's voice snapped. 3 more breaches this week alone. They're testing us, Sebastian, seeing how far they can push before we push back. Penelope paused in her dusting of the hallway portraits, recognizing Vance's voice among the others. The meeting had been going on since dawn, a steady stream of serious-looking men arriving at the estate in expensive cars with tinted windows. I'm aware of the situation, Sebastian's voice carried clearly, tight with controlled fury. But we don't start wars over territorial posturing. This isn't posturing, another voice interjected. Maximilian's people killed 2 of our scouts last night. How is that not an act of war? Penelope's blood chilled. Killed? What kind of business dispute involved actual deaths? A crash from upstairs made her jump, something heavy hitting the floor, followed by Oliver's distressed cry. Penelope dropped her dust cloth and ran toward the sound, her heart hammering with familiar maternal panic. She found Oliver in his room, pressed against the far wall with his hands over his ears. His bookshelf had been overturned, astronomy texts and star charts scattered across the floor. Near the window, a boy who looked about 12 stood with his fists clenched, his face twisted with cruel satisfaction. I told you to shut up about your stupid stars, the boy snarled. Nobody cares about your weird obsessions. Penelope's vision went red with protective fury. Get away from him. The boy turned toward her, and Penelope saw something feral in his eyes, something that didn't belong in a child's face. This isn't your business, lady. The freak needs to learn his place. The word freak triggered something primal in Penelope. Heat flared through her body, and she felt power she'd never experienced before surge through her veins. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that made the boy step back instinctively. You will leave. Now. For a split second, Penelope caught her reflection in Oliver's mirror and gasped. Her eyes were glowing gold, bright and inhuman in her pale face. The boy scrambled backward, fear replacing his aggression. Your eyes, what are you? Penelope blinked hard, and when she looked again, her reflection was normal. But the boy was already fleeing, shoving past her to race down the hallway. Penelope? Oliver's voice was small and shaky. What just happened? She turned to him, her heart still pounding from whatever had just occurred. Oliver was staring at her with wide eyes, but not with fear, with something that looked almost like recognition. I don't know, sweetheart. Penelope knelt beside him, checking for injuries while her mind reeled. Are you hurt? No, but... Oliver hesitated. Your eyes changed color. They looked like father's do sometimes when he's really angry. Before Penelope could process that statement, heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Sebastian appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of controlled fury, with Vance close behind him. What happened? Sebastian's gaze swept the destroyed room before settling on Oliver. Are you injured? The other boy knocked over my books, Oliver said quietly. But Penelope made him leave. Vance's cold blue eyes fixed on Penelope with sharp interest. Did she now? And how exactly did you accomplish that, Miss Ashworth? Penelope stood slowly, her instincts screaming danger. I told him to go, and he went. Sometimes bullies just need someone to stand up to them. Interesting, Vance murmured. Tyler mentioned something about your eyes. Tyler was upset, Penelope said firmly. Children see things differently when they're frightened. Sebastian stepped closer, studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Leave us, he told Vance quietly. Sebastian. Now. Vance's jaw tightened, but he obeyed, shooting Penelope one last measuring look before disappearing down the hallway. Oliver, Sebastian said gently, why don't you go help Sophia in the garden? I need to speak with Penelope. Oliver nodded, carefully gathering his scattered books. As he passed Penelope, he whispered, "Thank you for protecting me." When they were alone, Sebastian closed the door and leaned against it, his face grave. "What really happened here?" he asked. Penelope tried to maintain her composure, but the memory of her reflection, those impossible golden eyes, made her hands tremble. "I told you. A boy was bullying Oliver, and I intervened." "And your eyes?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Sebastian moved closer, and Penelope caught that wild scent she'd noticed before, stronger now. "Penelope, I need you to trust me. What you're experiencing, the dreams, the heightened senses, what happened with your eyes just now, it's not normal human behavior." Penelope's breath caught. "How do you know about the dreams?" "Because I know what you are, even if you don't understand it yet." Sebastian's voice was gentle but urgent. "You have werewolf blood, Penelope. It's been dormant, but something is waking it up." The words should have sounded insane. They should have sent her running for the door, grabbing Sophia and never looking back. Instead, they felt like the missing piece of a puzzle she'd been trying to solve her entire life. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it? Haven't you always felt different? Haven't you always been able to sense things others couldn't, connect with people in ways that seemed almost supernatural?" Penelope sank into Oliver's desk chair, her legs suddenly weak. The truth was, she had always felt different. Her grandmother used to say she had old soul eyes, and an uncanny ability to calm frightened animals. She'd attributed it to intuition, to being naturally empathetic. But the dreams of running on four legs, the way her hearing had sharpened since arriving at the estate, the protective fury that had made her eyes glow, those weren't human traits. "How is this possible?" she asked quietly. "Werewolf bloodlines can skip generations, sometimes lying dormant for decades before manifesting. The fact that yours is awakening now." Sebastian ran a hand through his dark hair. "There are only a few things that could trigger such a dramatic change." "Such as?" Sebastian's eyes met hers, and Penelope saw something raw and vulnerable in their depths. "Finding your mate." The word hung between them like a live wire, crackling with possibility and danger. "Mate," Penelope repeated slowly. "In werewolf culture, mates are more than spouses. They're two halves of the same soul, bound together by forces beyond human understanding. When true mates find each other, it can trigger dormant supernatural abilities." Penelope's heart raced. "You think that you and I?" "I think," Sebastian said carefully, "that what I'm feeling for you, what's been growing between us, is more than attraction. I think you're my second chance mate, Penelope. And I think your bloodline is responding to mine." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Pemberton's voice called from the hallway, "Mr. Ravenshollow? Dr. Frost has arrived." Sebastian's face went carefully blank. "I'll be right there." "Dr. Frost?" Penelope asked. "The pack doctor. She's been studying abroad for the past 2 years." Sebastian's tone was neutral, but Penelope caught the tension beneath it. "She's also Oliver's new therapist." Something in his voice made Penelope's newly awakened instincts prickle with warning. "Anyone I should know about?" Sebastian hesitated. "Lydia and I, we have history. Before Isabella, we were involved. She's been hoping to resume our relationship since she returned." Penelope felt a spike of something that might have been jealousy, followed immediately by confusion. She had no claim on Sebastian, no right to feel possessive. But the thought of another woman expecting to pick up where she'd left off with him made Penelope's chest tighten uncomfortably. "I should get back to work," Penelope said, standing abruptly. "Penelope, wait." Sebastian caught her arm gently. "What I told you about mates, about what's happening between us, we need to talk about this more." "Do we?" Penelope pulled free, her emotions churning. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you already have someone waiting to resume your life with you." "It's not like that. Isn't it?" Penelope moved toward the door. I'm just the maid, Sebastian. Whatever this is, whatever you think is happening, maybe you should focus on your real responsibilities. She left him standing in Oliver's room, her heart pounding with confusion and hurt and the terrifying possibility that everything she'd thought she knew about herself was wrong. Downstairs, Penelope tried to lose herself in her work, but her newly sharpened hearing made it impossible to ignore the conversation drifting from Sebastian's office. Sebastian, darling, you look tired. The woman's voice was cultured, confident. I hope you've been taking care of yourself while I was away. Hello, Lydia. How was Edinburgh? Educational. But I missed home. I missed you. Penelope gripped her cleaning supplies tighter, hating the way her heart clenched at the obvious intimacy in the woman's tone. Things have changed since you left, Sebastian said carefully. Have they? Because from what Vance tells me, you've been isolating yourself even more. And Oliver. A pause. Sebastian, when I heard about his difficulties, about the episodes, I knew I had to come back. A child like that needs specialized care. A child like what? The sharp edge in Sebastian's voice would have warned anyone with sense to tread carefully. Apparently Dr. Frost wasn't that wise. You know what I mean. His behavioral issues, the social deficits. It's not uncommon in our kind when there are complications during pregnancy. The supernatural healing factors sometimes interfere with normal neural development. Penelope's hands stilled on the banister she'd been polishing. Dr. Frost was talking about Oliver like he was damaged goods, reducing his beautiful, complex mind to a list of deficits. Oliver is not damaged, Sebastian said coldly. Of course not, darling. But he does need help learning to function in pack society. The other children his age are already showing dominance behaviors, beginning their training. Oliver still plays with books and telescopes like a human child. Maybe because he is still a child. A werewolf child who will one day be expected to lead. Sebastian, I know this is difficult, but ignoring his limitations won't make them disappear. With proper therapy, medication if necessary, we can help him develop more appropriate behaviors. Penelope was moving before she'd made a conscious decision, marching towards Sebastian's office with fury burning in her chest. She knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Dr. Lydia Frost was exactly what Penelope had expected, tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of classic beauty that belonged in magazines. She was also standing far too close to Sebastian, her manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. I'm sorry to interrupt, Penelope said, not feeling sorry at all. But I wanted to introduce myself since I'll be working closely with Oliver. I'm Penelope Ashworth. Lydia's green eyes catalogued Penelope from head to toe with cool assessment. The maid. Yes, Vance mentioned you. I'm Dr. Frost. The dismissal in her tone was clear, but Penelope held her ground. I understand you'll be working with Oliver on his therapy. That's correct. The poor child clearly needs professional intervention. Penelope's temper flared. There's nothing poor about Oliver. He's brilliant, sensitive, and perfectly capable of thriving with the right support. Lydia's smile was patronizing. I'm sure you mean well, but childhood development, especially in our kind, requires specialized training to understand. Oliver shows clear signs of developmental delays that need to be addressed before they become more entrenched. What he shows, Penelope said firmly, are signs of being a gifted child who processes the world differently than others. That's not a deficit to be corrected, it's a difference to be celebrated. How refreshing, Lydia said, her tone sharp with condescension. A cleaning woman with opinions on pediatric psychology. Penelope felt that familiar heat building in her chest, her vision starting to shift. Before she could embarrass herself by having her eyes glow again, Sebastian stepped between them. That's enough, he said quietly. Lydia, Penelope has been working closely with Oliver and has developed valuable insights into his needs. Penelope, Dr. Frost is here as a consultant, not to take over Oliver's care completely. Both women looked at him with surprise, but for different reasons. Penelope was struck by his defense of her opinions, while Lydia clearly hadn't expected to be contradicted. Of course, Lydia said smoothly, but Penelope caught the calculating look in her eyes. I'm sure we can all work together for Oliver's benefit. Penelope nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The territorial instincts she was experiencing were becoming harder to control, and the last thing she needed was to have another supernatural episode in front of Dr. Frost. I should get back to my duties, Penelope said. As she turned to leave, she heard Lydia say quietly to Sebastian, we really do need to discuss Oliver's treatment plan. Perhaps over dinner tonight? I'm staying at the inn in town, but I'd love to see the estate properly. Penelope didn't wait to hear Sebastian's response. She fled upstairs, her heart pounding with emotions she couldn't begin to untangle. In her small room, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, searching for signs of the golden eyes that had appeared earlier. Her reflection looked normal, human, but Penelope no longer trusted appearances. If Sebastian was right, if she really did have werewolf blood awakening inside her, then everything was about to change. Her life, her relationship with Sophia, her understanding of who and what she was. And if Dr. Lydia Frost had her way, Penelope suspected she wouldn't be around long enough to figure any of it out. Outside her window, she could hear Oliver and Sophia playing in the garden, their laughter bright and innocent in the gathering dusk. Whatever was happening to her, whatever she was becoming, Penelope knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would protect Oliver from anyone who tried to change his beautiful, unique mind. Even if it meant embracing powers she didn't understand. Even if it meant fighting for a place in a world where she might never truly belong. Chapter 5. The garden behind the estate's east wing was overgrown and wild, forgotten by the careful landscaping that maintained the rest of the grounds. Penelope had discovered it 3 days ago while trying to escape the tension that seemed to follow her everywhere since Dr. Frost's arrival. Now, she found herself drawn back to its peaceful chaos whenever the house felt too small to contain her churning emotions. She was deadheading roses when the old woman appeared. You have gentle hands, child. The flowers respond to your touch. Penelope spun around, startled. An elderly woman stood at the garden's entrance, leaning heavily on a gnarled walking stick. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair braided down her back and dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. I'm sorry, Penelope said quickly. I didn't know anyone was here. I can leave. Nonsense. This garden has been waiting for someone like you. The woman moved closer, and Penelope caught a scent that was familiar yet foreign, earth and moonlight and something wild that made her newly awakened senses hum with recognition. I am Grandmother Willow. And you, child, are the one who has our Alpha's heart in such beautiful turmoil. Penelope's cheeks flushed. I don't know what you mean. Grandmother Willow's laugh was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Oh, but you do. The question is whether you understand what you are, what your presence here means for all of us. I'm just a maid, Penelope said automatically, the words tasting like lies on her tongue. A maid. Grandmother Willow settled onto a stone bench, patting the space beside her. A maid whose eyes glow gold when she's protective, whose touch can calm the wildest heart, whose very presence makes flowers bloom brighter. Sit, Luna child. It's time you learned the truth. Luna child. The word sent a shiver through Penelope that had nothing to do with the cool morning air. She sat reluctantly, her hands twisting in her lap. Tell me about your grandmother, Grandmother Willow said gently. Your mother's mother. What was her maiden name? Silvermoon, Penelope said slowly. Isabella Silvermoon. But I don't see what. Grandmother Willow's intake of breath was sharp. Silvermoon. Sweet Mother Moon should have sensed it immediately. She turned to face Penelope fully, her ancient eyes bright with amazement. Child, you are descended from the Luna bloodline. The healers, the peace-bringers, the heart of every pack. We thought your line extinct. Penelope's world tilted. That's impossible. Is it? Haven't you always been able to soothe troubled souls? Haven't animals always trusted you instinctively? Haven't you felt the pull of the moon, the call of the wild, even when you didn't understand what it meant? The questions hit too close to home. Penelope thought of her childhood, how stray dogs would follow her home, how she'd always known when thunderstorms were coming hours before they arrived, how she'd been able to calm her grandmother's pain in those final days when nothing else could touch her suffering. The Luna bloodline, Penelope whispered. What does that mean? It means you are precious beyond measure, child. Luna wolves were the backbone of pack society. They could heal both physical and emotional wounds, could calm the savage beast in any werewolf, could bring peace to the most chaotic situations. They were protectors of cubs, mediators of disputes, the bridge between our wild nature and our human hearts. Penelope felt pieces clicking into place, her instinctive understanding of Oliver, the way her touch seemed to accelerate Sebastian's healing when she'd tended his wounds, the protective fury that had made her eyes glow when that boy threatened Oliver. But if Luna wolves were so important, Penelope said slowly, what happened to them? Grandmother Willow's expression darkened. They were hunted. Targeted by those who would exploit their gifts for power. The last known Luna wolf died 50 years ago, killed by a rival alpha who wanted to force bond with her and steal her abilities. We thought the bloodline had ended. A chill ran down Penelope's spine. Exploit their gifts how? A Luna wolf bonded to an alpha makes him nearly invincible. Her healing abilities become his, her calming influence extends to his entire pack, making them more unified, more powerful than any other werewolf group. But the bond must be willing, born of true love. Forced bonds, they destroy the Luna wolf, drain her life force until there's nothing left. Penelope's mouth went dry. And people know about this? About what Luna wolves can do? The older alphas remember the stories. Some would kill to possess such power. Grandmother Willow's hand covered Penelope's, warm and surprisingly strong. You are in great danger, child. But you're also our greatest hope. Hope for what? For healing. For bringing our pack back from the brink of destruction it's been walking since Isabella's death. Sebastian is a good alpha, but grief has made him hard, closed off from his pack's emotional needs. Oliver suffers not just from his neurodivergence, but from feeling disconnected from his father and his werewolf heritage. You could heal them both. Penelope thought of the tentative progress she'd seen between Sebastian and Oliver during their stargazing sessions, the way Oliver had begun opening up about his fears and dreams. What about Dr. Frost? Penelope asked. She seems to think Oliver needs medical intervention. Grandmother Willow's expression soured. Lydia Frost thinks in terms of human psychology, not werewolf nature. She would medicate away Oliver's gifts, force him into a mold that will break his spirit. She doesn't understand that what makes him different also makes him powerful. Different how? The boy has Luna traits, passed down from his mother's line. That's why he responds to you so strongly. You recognize each other at a soul level. His sensitivity, his ability to read emotional currents, his natural empathy, these aren't deficits to be corrected. They're gifts to be nurtured. Penelope's heart swelled with protective love for Oliver. She'd known instinctively that his differences were strengths, not weaknesses. There's something else, Grandmother Willow said quietly. Dr. Frost's return, the timing is suspicious. Luna wolves are drawn to their mates across impossible distances. If your bloodline is awakening because you found Sebastian, then others will sense it too. They'll come looking. A door slammed somewhere in the main house, followed by raised voices. Penelope recognized Lydia's sharp tone, though she couldn't make out the words. I should get back, Penelope said reluctantly. Sophia will be looking for me soon. Grandmother Willow nodded but caught Penelope's hand as she stood. Be careful, child. Trust your instincts. And remember, your power lies not in hiding what you are, but in embracing it fully. Penelope found the house in controlled chaos. Pack members were arriving for what Mrs. Pemberton had mentioned was a monthly celebration, though the atmosphere felt more like a business meeting than a party. Penelope recognized several of the men from the territorial dispute discussion, their faces grim as they gathered in the main hall. She was arranging flowers in the foyer when she overheard Lydia talking to Vance near the staircase. Concerning developments with the boy, Lydia was saying. His attachment to the maid is becoming problematic. She's encouraging his fantasy behaviors instead of helping him develop appropriate pack socialization. What do you recommend? Vance's voice was coldly professional. Separation, obviously. The woman needs to understand her place, and Oliver needs to bond with appropriate werewolf children his age. I've suggested to Sebastian that we enroll him in a specialized program I know of, very exclusive, very effective at correcting developmental abnormalities. Penelope's hands stilled on the flower stems. Correcting abnormalities? They were talking about Oliver like he was a problem to be solved rather than a child to be loved. And the maid? Vance asked. Oh, I'm sure she'll find her current position untenable very soon. Sometimes people just realize they're not suited for certain environments. The malice in Lydia's tone made Penelope's blood run cold. She was planning something, some way to force Penelope out of Oliver's life. The sound of Oliver crying interrupted her thoughts. Penelope followed the sound to the music room, where she found him huddled behind the piano, his hands pressed over his ears. The noise from the gathering crowd was clearly overwhelming him. Hey, sweetheart, Penelope said softly, kneeling beside him. Too many people. Oliver nodded miserably. They're all so loud, and they smell wrong. Angry and hungry. I don't like it when the pack comes here. Penelope felt a surge of that protective warmth she was learning to associate with her Luna heritage. Without thinking, she placed her hand on Oliver's forehead, and immediately felt the tension drain from his small body. Better? She asked. How do you do that? Oliver looked up at her with wonder. It's like you take all the scary feelings away. Before Penelope could answer, Sebastian appeared in the doorway. His face was tight with stress, but his expression softened when he saw her comforting Oliver. The celebration is starting, he said quietly. Oliver, you need to make an appearance. The pack expects to see their future alpha. Oliver's face crumpled. I can't, Father. There are too many of them, and they're all staring at me like I'm some kind of exhibit. Penelope saw the conflict in Sebastian's expression, his need to present a united front to his pack warring with his growing understanding of his son's struggles. What if Penelope came with us? Sebastian suggested. Just for a few minutes. Penelope started to protest. She was staff, not family, but Oliver's hopeful expression stopped her. You'd stay with me? Oliver asked. Of course. The main hall was packed with werewolves, their conversations creating a low roar that made Penelope's sensitive hearing ache. She could smell the territorial tension in the air, the barely contained aggression that seemed to simmer just beneath the surface of civilized behavior. Oliver pressed close to her side as they entered, his small hand gripping hers tightly. Penelope noticed how the conversations died as they passed, how every pair of eyes tracked their movement through the room. The maid brought the boy, someone murmured. How unusual. Penelope felt Oliver tense beside her and squeezed his hand reassuringly. They made it halfway across the room before disaster struck. A young werewolf, barely more than a teenager, stepped directly into their path, his posture aggressive and challenging. So this is our future alpha, he sneered. Hiding behind his human nanny like a scared pup. Oliver went rigid with humiliation and fear. Penelope felt his distress like a physical blow, and something primitive and protective roared to life in her chest. Move, she said quietly. The young werewolf laughed. Or what? You'll clean me to death? His mockery was the last straw. Penelope felt power surge through her, felt her eyes begin to glow with that golden light. But this time, instead of just her eyes changing, she felt something deeper awakening. I said move. Her voice carried an authority that made every werewolf in the immediate vicinity step back instinctively. The golden glow spread from her eyes to encompass her entire being, and Penelope felt the Luna power flowing through her like liquid starlight. The room went dead silent. Oliver looked up at her with awe rather than fear. You're like the moon, he whispered. Beautiful and powerful and safe. But Penelope barely heard him. She was focused on the young werewolf in front of them, who had gone pale with shock and something that might have been recognition. Luna, he breathed. You're a Luna wolf." The words rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Penelope heard gasps, whispers, the sound of chairs scraping as people moved to get a better look at her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a specimen under a microscope. The power that had felt so natural moments before now seemed dangerous, uncontrolled. "Penelope." Sebastian's voice cut through the chaos, calm and steady. She turned to find him beside her, his hand on her shoulder grounding her. "It's all right. Let it fade." Gradually, the golden glow dimmed until she looked human again. But the damage was done, everyone had seen, everyone knew. From across the room, Penelope caught sight of a man she didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, with predatory eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about her newfound abilities. He was speaking quietly into a cell phone, his gaze never leaving her face. "We need to go," Sebastian said urgently. "Now." Penelope didn't argue. She scooped Oliver into her arms, the boy was shaking with exhaustion from the emotional overload, and followed Sebastian toward the exit. Behind them, the room erupted into heated discussion. Penelope caught fragments of conversation as they fled. Thought the bloodline was extinct. Incredibly valuable. Dangerous to have her here. They made it to the staircase before Lydia intercepted them, her face a mask of false concern. "Sebastian, darling, we really should discuss what just happened. Penelope clearly needs medical evaluation. Such dramatic displays could be symptomatic of a serious psychological condition." Penelope felt Oliver tense in her arms. Even exhausted, he recognized the threat in Lydia's tone. "The only thing Penelope needs," Sebastian said coldly, "is for people to stop treating her like a specimen." Lydia's smile was sharp. "Of course. But surely you understand the implications of what we just witnessed. If word gets out about what she is." "It won't," Sebastian said firmly. But Penelope noticed that Lydia's hand was in her pocket, and she'd swear she caught the woman pressing buttons on a concealed phone. Later that night, after Oliver was finally settled and asleep, Penelope stood at her bedroom window staring out at the estate grounds. In the distance, she could see vehicles leaving the property, pack members returning to their homes with news of what they'd witnessed. She thought about Grandmother Willow's warnings, about Luna wolves being hunted for their power. She thought about the predatory interest in that stranger's eyes, about Lydia's calculating smile. Most of all, she thought about Oliver's whispered words, "You're like the moon. Beautiful and powerful and safe." Penelope pressed her palm against the cool glass and made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever dangers her awakening heritage brought to their door, she would protect the people she'd come to love. Even if it meant embracing a power that terrified her. Even if it meant becoming something she'd never imagined possible. In the shadows beyond the estate's gates, figures moved silently through the darkness, scouts and spies drawn by rumors of a Luna wolf's return. And in a compound 50 miles away, an alpha named Maximilian Grimthorne studied the photos and videos his informant had sent, his eyes gleaming with hunger for the power that had just revealed itself. The hunt for Penelope Ashworth had begun. Chapter 6. Penelope should have trusted her instincts about Dr. Lydia Frost from the beginning. The thought flickered through her mind as she watched Lydia prepare for what was supposedly Oliver's first official therapy session. Something felt wrong, the way Lydia kept glancing at her watch, the tension radiating from her usually composed demeanor, the strange herbal tea she'd insisted on brewing for Penelope, to help you relax while we work. "I really think it would be beneficial for you to observe," Lydia said, her smile too bright as she handed Penelope the steaming cup. "Oliver responds so well to your presence. Having you calm and centered will help him open up." Penelope accepted the tea but didn't drink it, her newly awakened senses picking up an underlying bitterness beneath the chamomile scent. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish in this session?" "Oh, the usual." Lydia settled into the chair across from Oliver, who was building an intricate pattern with colored blocks on the coffee table. "We need to address his attachment issues, his resistance to traditional pack hierarchy, his tendency to retreat into fantasy rather than face reality." Penelope bristled. "His interests in astronomy and science aren't fantasy. They're intellectual pursuits that challenge and stimulate him. Of course, dear. Lydia's tone was patronizing. But Oliver needs to understand his role in pack society. He can't spend his life hiding behind books and telescopes. Oliver looked up from his blocks, his dark eyes flicking between the two women. Penelope caught the subtle tension in his small shoulders, the way his hands stilled on the blocks. He was picking up on the undercurrent of conflict, and it was making him anxious. "Why don't you drink your tea?" Lydia suggested to Penelope. "It will help you stay relaxed while we discuss some difficult topics." Penelope set the cup down without tasting it. "I'm fine, thank you." Lydia's smile faltered for just a moment before brightening again. "Oliver, why don't you tell me about these communication signals your father mentioned? The ones Penelope helped you develop?" Penelope's attention sharpened. She and Oliver had indeed created a simple system, hand signals and code words that helped him express his needs when verbal communication became difficult during overwhelming moments. But she'd never mentioned it to Lydia, and she was certain Sebastian hadn't either. "How did you know about that?" Penelope asked carefully. "Oh, I'm sure someone mentioned it." Lydia waved dismissively. "These alternative communication methods can be helpful short-term, but we need to focus on developing Oliver's normal social skills." Oliver's hands moved in a subtle pattern, the signal he and Penelope had established for danger. Penelope's blood chilled as she realized the boy had picked up on something she'd missed. "Actually," Penelope said, standing slowly, "I think we should postpone this session. Oliver seems tired." "Nonsense. We've barely started." Lydia's voice carried a sharp edge now. "Oliver, show me the signals. I need to understand this system so we can phase it out properly." "No." Oliver's voice was quiet but firm. "The signals are private. Between me and Penelope." Lydia's facade cracked completely. "Oliver, you will do as I say. I'm here to help you, but you need to cooperate." Penelope saw red. "Don't you dare use that tone with him. I'm a licensed therapist trying to do my job," Lydia snapped. "And you're an untrained maid who's filled this child's head with inappropriate ideas about his condition." "My condition isn't wrong," Oliver said suddenly, his voice stronger than Penelope had ever heard it. "Penelope says being different makes me special, not broken." "Penelope is not qualified to make that determination," Lydia said coldly. "Now drink your tea so we can discuss this rationally." The repeated insistence on the tea sent alarm bells clanging in Penelope's head. She picked up the cup and sniffed it more carefully, her enhanced senses catching something that made her stomach clench with fear. Sedatives. Strong ones. "Oliver," Penelope said quietly, "remember what we practiced about the emergency signal?" The boy's eyes widened with understanding. His hands moved in a complex pattern, one they developed for, "Get father immediately," and Penelope saw him press something under the coffee table. A panic button Sebastian had installed after the pack celebration incident. "Very touching," Lydia said, and her voice had changed completely. Gone was any pretense of warmth or professionalism. "But I'm afraid your little games won't help you now." Penelope spun toward the door, intending to get Oliver out of the room, but found their way blocked by two men she didn't recognize. Large, intimidating, with the predatory stillness she was learning to associate with dangerous werewolves. "Dr. Frost?" Penelope's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "What's going on?" "What's going on," Lydia said with satisfaction, "is that I'm about to deliver the most valuable prize in the supernatural world to someone who will properly appreciate her worth." "Maximilian," Penelope breathed, the pieces clicking into place. "Very good. Yes, Alpha Grimthorn has been quite eager to meet you since your dramatic display at the pack celebration. Luna wolves are so rare, so incredibly useful to the right Alpha." Penelope's protective instincts flared as Oliver pressed against her side, his small body trembling with fear. "You won't touch him." "Oh, I have no interest in the boy." "Damaged goods, really." "But you." Lydia's smile was sharp with malice. "You're going to make Maximilian the most powerful Alpha on the continent." Penelope felt the familiar heat building in her chest, the golden power beginning to rise. But before she could fully access it, one of the men moved with inhuman speed, pressing something against her neck. Pain lanced through her body, and Penelope felt her powers short-circuit, leaving her dizzy and weak. Oliver cried out as she stumbled, his small hands reaching for her. A dampening device, Lydia explained conversationally. Very expensive, very effective at neutralizing supernatural abilities temporarily. Maximilian spares no expense when acquiring valuable assets. Through the ringing in her ears, Penelope heard the distant sound of an alarm, Oliver's panic button working exactly as intended. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house, voices shouting orders. "Time to go," Lydia said crisply. One of the men grabbed Penelope's arm, hauling her toward the French doors that led to the garden. Penelope fought against the device's effects, trying to summon her power, but the golden warmth remained frustratingly out of reach. "Penelope." Oliver's cry was desperate. "Don't take her." The sound of her name in the boy's terrified voice triggered something primal in Penelope. The dampening device was strong, but her protective fury was stronger. She felt the Luna power surge through her like liquid fire, burning away the artificial constraints. Her transformation was instant and overwhelming. One moment Penelope was human, the next she was something between woman and wolf, golden light streaming from her skin, her senses expanded beyond anything she'd experienced before, power flowing through her like a river of starlight. The men holding her stumbled backward in shock. Even Lydia took an involuntary step away from the raw supernatural energy radiating from Penelope's transformed state. But Penelope couldn't control it. The power was too new, too vast, and her emotions were too chaotic. She felt herself losing the connection to her human consciousness, felt the wolf taking over completely. The French doors exploded inward as Sebastian burst into the room, his own eyes blazing with alpha fury. Behind him came Vance and 3 other pack members, their faces grim with battle readiness. "Penelope." Sebastian's voice cut through the chaos, and for a moment, she almost found her way back to human thought. But the men who tried to take her were already moving, one of them grabbing Oliver while the other lunged toward Penelope with some kind of dart gun. Penelope's wolf instincts took over completely, and she launched herself at Oliver's attacker with a snarl that shook the windows. The room erupted into violence. Werewolves clashed with inhuman speed and strength, furniture splintering under the impact of bodies moving faster than human eyes could follow. Through it all, Penelope fought to protect Oliver, her transformed state making her powerful but unpredictable. In the chaos, she didn't see Maximilian Grimthorne until it was too late. He appeared as if from nowhere, tall, dark-haired, with an aura of command that rivaled Sebastian's. But where Sebastian's power felt like protective warmth, Maximilian's was cold and hungry, like a winter storm. "Beautiful," he murmured, watching Penelope struggle to maintain control. "Even untrained, your power is magnificent." Penelope spun toward him, still caught between human and wolf, her golden glow flickering wildly. Maximilian smiled and raised his hand, revealing a pendant that pulsed with sickly green light. "A claiming mark," he said conversationally. "Very old magic, very binding. Once it touches you, you become mine whether you will it or not." Penelope tried to dodge, but her unfamiliar transformed state made her clumsy. The pendant struck her shoulder, and she screamed as supernatural fire raced through her veins. The claiming mark burned like acid as it seared itself into her skin, and Penelope felt something essential being torn away from her. Her connection to her own power wavered, replaced by a growing weakness that made her stumble. 7 days, Maximilian said with satisfaction. "That's how long you have before the mark drains your life completely. Come to me willingly, submit to my bond, and I'll remove it. Fight me, and die slowly while everyone you care about watches helplessly." Penelope. Sebastian's roar of fury shook the house as he realized what had happened. He launched himself at Maximilian with deadly intent, but the other alpha was already moving, his people covering his retreat. "Choose carefully, Luna Wolf," Maximilian called as he disappeared through the shattered French doors. 7 days to decide whether your pride is worth more than your life. Penelope collapsed as her transformation abruptly ended, leaving her human and vulnerable on the blood-stained carpet. The claiming mark on her shoulder burned like a brand, and she could already feel the slow drain of her life force beginning. Sebastian was beside her instantly, his hands gentle as he gathered her against his chest. "Penelope, stay with me. Look at me." She tried to focus on his face, but the world was spinning. "Oliver," she whispered. "Is he safe?" "He's safe. Sophia's safe. You protected them." Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. "But Penelope, the claiming mark." "I know." Penelope forced herself to meet his eyes. 7 days. "We'll find a way to break it," Sebastian said fiercely. "I won't let him have you." Penelope wanted to believe him, but she could feel the mark's power growing stronger by the minute, drawing her life away like water through a broken dam. "There's something else," she whispered. "Maximilian, when he looked at me, he said something about finishing what he started years ago. About making sure the Luna bloodline stayed extinct." Penelope's voice broke. "Sebastian, I think he killed my parents." The admission hung between them like a death sentence. Penelope had always been told her parents died in a car accident when she was 3, raised by her grandmother who'd never spoken much about the details. But the recognition in Maximilian's eyes when he'd looked at her, the satisfaction in his voice when he'd mentioned old business, it all made terrible sense. Sebastian's arms tightened around her protectively. "We'll make him pay for that too." But Penelope could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear that was growing in her chest. The claiming mark wasn't just a death sentence, it was a countdown timer, forcing her to choose between her own life and the safety of everyone she'd come to love. 7 days to live. 7 days to find a way to defeat an alpha who'd been planning her family's destruction for decades. 7 days to master powers she barely understood, or watch everything she'd fought to protect crumble around her. As Sebastian carried her from the destroyed room, Penelope caught sight of Oliver and Sophia huddled together in the hallway, their young faces pale with terror but their eyes bright with fierce loyalty. Whatever happened in the next 7 days, whatever sacrifices had to be made, Penelope knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would die before she let Maximilian Grimthorne hurt the children she'd come to love as her own. The claiming mark pulsed with malevolent energy, reminding her that death might not be a choice much longer. But until her last breath, she would fight. Chapter 7. Penelope had 5 days left to live. The claiming mark on her shoulder burned constantly now, a steady drain on her life force that left her weaker with each passing hour. She could feel Maximilian's supernatural tether pulling at her very soul, demanding submission, promising relief from the agony if she would only surrender. She stood at her bedroom window in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the moon set beyond the estate's ancient trees. Soon, that moon would rise 6 more times, and if she hadn't found a solution by then, it would be her last. "You're not sleeping again." Penelope didn't turn as Sebastian entered her room, though her heart clenched at the exhaustion in his voice. He'd barely left her side since the attack, researching ancient texts, calling every supernatural contact he had, desperate to find a way to break Maximilian's claim. "The mark won't let me rest," Penelope said quietly. "Every time I close my eyes, I can feel him calling to me, promising that the pain will stop if I just come to him." Sebastian's arms came around her from behind, his warmth a temporary balm against the supernatural cold eating away at her strength. "We're going to find another way." Penelope leaned back against his chest, memorizing the feel of him, the steady beat of his heart against her back. "Sebastian, we need to talk about the mating bond option." She felt him stiffen. "Penelope. No, listen to me." Penelope turned in his arms, looking up into his dark eyes. Grandmother Willow explained the risks. "An alpha bond with a Luna wolf is incredibly powerful, but if the Luna isn't strong enough to handle the connection, it can kill the alpha. You could die trying to save me. And I could live," Sebastian said fiercely. "Penelope, you're my mate. I can feel it in every fiber of my being. The bond between us is already there, completing it won't create something new, it will just make official what already exists. But if you're wrong, if I'm wrong, then Oliver loses a father who failed to save the woman he loves." Sebastian's hands framed her face gently. "If I'm right, he gains a mother who can help him become everything he's meant to be. Penelope's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. I can't risk making Oliver an orphan. I won't be responsible for taking you away from him. Then what's your alternative? Sebastian's voice was rough with desperation. Because I'm not letting you face Maximilian alone, and I'm sure as hell not letting you submit to him. Penelope had been dreading this conversation, but she couldn't avoid it any longer. There is another way. The ritual grounds where Luna wolves once held their ceremonies, Grandmother Willow says the power there could amplify my abilities enough to either break the claim or what? Or destroy it so completely that no one else could ever be claimed again. But using that much power. Penelope swallowed hard. It would likely kill me. Sebastian's face went white. Absolutely not. It's the only way to guarantee Maximilian can never hurt anyone else. I said no. Sebastian's alpha authority rang in his voice. I won't lose you, Penelope. Not when I've just found you. Penelope felt the familiar warmth of her Luna power responding to his distress, trying to calm and soothe him even as her own heart was breaking. And I won't lose you or Oliver because of my problems. They stared at each other in the growing dawn light, two people who loved each other too much to risk the other's life, both willing to sacrifice everything to protect what mattered most. A soft knock at the door interrupted their standoff. Penelope? Oliver's voice was muffled but determined. Can I come in? I have an idea. Penelope quickly wiped her eyes and opened the door. Oliver stood in the hallway in his pajamas, his dark hair mussed from sleep, but his expression was more serious than she'd ever seen it. You're planning to leave without us, he said without preamble. You're going to try to face the bad man alone. Penelope's breath caught. Oliver. I'm not a baby, Oliver said firmly. I know you're dying. I can smell it on you, like winter coming too early. And I know Father wants to do the mating bond to save you, but you're scared it will hurt him. Sebastian knelt to Oliver's eye level. Son, this isn't something you need to worry about. Yes, it is. Oliver's voice carried a strength Penelope had never heard before. Penelope taught me that families protect each other. That love means being brave even when you're scared. Well, she's my family now, and I'm going to help save her. Penelope's heart shattered a little more. Sweetheart, there's nothing. The ritual grounds, Oliver interrupted. Grandmother Willow told you about them, right? The place where Luna wolves used to do their magic. Penelope nodded, surprised by his knowledge. I know where they are, Oliver said simply. The constellation patterns you taught me, they're not just random. They're a map. The ancient wolves used the stars to mark sacred places, and I've been tracking them since you first showed me Cassiopeia. Sebastian stared at his son with amazement. Oliver, how do you know all this? Because I listen, Oliver said matter-of-factly. Adults think kids don't understand important things, but I hear everything. And I've been reading Mother's journals, the ones you keep in the locked cabinet in your office. Sebastian's face went pale. You read Isabella's journals? She wrote about Luna wolves, Oliver said softly. About how special they were, how they were the heart of every pack. She was hoping Penelope would come someday to help me understand what I am. Penelope felt the world tilt. What you are? Oliver took her hand, his small fingers surprisingly warm. I have Luna traits too. From Mother's bloodline. That's why I respond to you so strongly, why I can sense things other kids can't. That's why the claiming mark is hurting me too. Penelope looked closer at Oliver and gasped. Faint dark lines were spreading from his wrist, an echo of her claiming mark, proving their supernatural connection. Oh, sweetheart, Penelope whispered, pulling him into her arms. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, Oliver said fiercely. Be brave. Let us help you fight. 4 hours later, Penelope found herself in Sebastian's office surrounded by ancient texts, star charts, and a collection of werewolves who'd never looked more determined. The entire Shadow Ridge pack had rallied once word spread of Maximilian's claiming mark, their alphas mate in danger, creating a unity Penelope had never seen before. The ritual grounds are here, Oliver said, pointing to a spot on the map where several constellation patterns intersected. About 30 miles north, in the old forest. But Penelope. His young face was troubled. The stars say tonight is the only time the power will be strong enough. If we wait any longer, the claiming mark will be too advanced to break. Penelope felt the truth of his words in her bones. The mark was spreading, dark veins of supernatural poison creeping across her skin like frost on a window. Then we go tonight, Sebastian said grimly. No. Penelope stood slowly, decision crystallizing in her mind. I go tonight. Alone. The room erupted in protests, but Penelope held up her hand for silence. Maximilian is expecting me to run to him or complete a mating bond with Sebastian. He's not expecting me to embrace the full power of my Luna heritage. If I can reach the ritual grounds alone, use the amplified power there to break not just my claiming mark but destroy his ability to claim anyone ever again. You'll die, Sebastian said flatly. Maybe. Or maybe I'll become something new, something powerful enough to protect everyone I love. Penelope looked around the room at the faces of the pack members, wolves who'd accepted her despite her human origins, who were willing to follow their alpha into battle to save her. She thought of Sophia, safe with grandmother Willow in the hidden sanctuary deep in the estate's grounds. She thought of Oliver, brilliant and brave and carrying Luna magic in his young soul. I won't let Maximilian hurt any of you, Penelope said firmly. This ends tonight. Vance stepped forward, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. Luna, with respect, you don't understand pack law. We don't let our family members face death alone. Family, Penelope repeated softly, the word wrapping around her heart like a warm embrace. Family, Sebastian confirmed. Whether you like it or not, you're ours now. Pack protects pack. Penelope felt tears threaten again, but this time they were born of gratitude rather than despair. If we do this together, some of you might not come back. Then we don't come back, Oliver said simply. But we don't let you face the bad man alone. Penelope looked at this extraordinary child, 8 years old and already showing the courage of a true leader, and felt her resolve waver. The mating bond option suddenly seemed less like a risk and more like a lifeline. Sebastian, she said quietly, if we complete the bond before facing Maximilian, would it make me strong enough to protect the pack? Yes, Sebastian said without hesitation. A fully bonded Luna and Alpha are nearly unstoppable together. And if I'm not strong enough to handle it? Sebastian's eyes were steady, certain. You are. I can feel your power, Penelope. It's vast and deep and more than strong enough to bond with mine. Penelope felt the claiming mark pulse with malicious energy, Maximilian's supernatural tether trying to drag her towards submission. But stronger than his poison was the warmth of Sebastian's love, the fierce loyalty of the pack, the bright courage of Oliver and Sophia. All right, she said finally. We do this together. The mating bond first, then we face Maximilian as a united pack. Penelope, Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. Are you sure? Penelope looked into his eyes, dark and warm and full of the love that had awakened her Luna heritage in the first place, and felt the rightness of the decision settle into her bones. I'm sure, she said. I love you, Sebastian. I love Oliver, I love this pack, and I'm not going to let Maximilian destroy any of it. Sebastian's smile was brilliant as he pulled her into his arms. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Penelope felt the claiming mark pulse with renewed fury. Maximilian would be expecting her soon, confident that his supernatural poison would drive her to submission. Instead, he was about to face a fully bonded Luna and Alpha, backed by a pack united in love and purpose. The final battle was coming, and Penelope finally felt ready to fight. But first, she had a mating bond to complete and a new life to begin, if they all survived the night ahead. Oliver took her hand as they prepared to leave for the ritual grounds, his small fingers warm and steady. The stars are aligned perfectly tonight, he said seriously, Mother's journals say that's when Luna wolves are strongest. When they can't be defeated by darkness. Penelope squeezed his hand gently. Then let's go light up the night. The claiming mark burned like fire against her skin, but Penelope's heart burned brighter with love and determination. Tonight, one way or another, Maximilian Grimthorne's reign of terror would end. And Penelope would either emerge as a fully bonded Luna with the power to protect everyone she loved, or she would die trying. Either way, she was done running. Chapter 8. The ancient ritual ground pulsed with power older than memory, stone circles carved with symbols that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Penelope felt the Luna magic in her blood responding to this sacred place, singing with recognition and ancient purpose. The mating bond ceremony had been simple but profound, Sebastian's hands in hers as they spoke vows that transcended human language, their supernatural essences intertwining until Penelope couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The claiming mark on her shoulder had screamed in fury as their bond solidified, Maximilian's poison fighting against the pure connection of true mates. Now, as Maximilian Grimthorne emerged from the shadows with a dozen of his pack members, Penelope felt their joined power flowing through her like liquid starlight. "How touching," Maximilian said, his voice carrying across the clearing with supernatural authority. "The Luna and her alpha, united in love. It won't save you, you know. The claiming mark is too advanced, you have perhaps an hour before it drains your life completely." Penelope could feel the truth of his words. The dark veins had spread across her chest now, each pulse of the mark sending weakness through her limbs. But she also felt Sebastian's strength supporting her, their bond allowing them to share power in ways she was only beginning to understand. "You murdered my parents," Penelope said, her voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "You destroyed the Luna bloodline to prevent anyone from challenging your power." Maximilian's smile was cold. Miguel and Carmen Ashworth were fools who thought love could protect them from necessity. Their daughter was meant to die with them, but the grandmother proved surprisingly resourceful at hiding Luna children. Rage blazed through Penelope, and she felt her power surge in response. Golden light began to emanate from her skin, and the ancient stones around them started to hum with awakened energy. "You will not speak of them," Penelope said, and her voice carried the authority of every Luna who had ever stood in this sacred place. "Magnificent," Maximilian breathed. "Even dying, your power is extraordinary. Imagine what we could accomplish together." "Together?" Sebastian stepped forward, his own alpha power creating a protective barrier around Penelope. "You mean what you could steal from her before discarding her broken body?" Maximilian's expression darkened. Sebastian Raven's hollow. Still clinging to outdated notions of honor and consent. "Your mate will be mine, willing or not. The claiming mark ensures it." The battle erupted without warning. Maximilian's pack attacked with coordinated precision, but the Shadow Ridge wolves met them with fierce determination. Penelope felt the Luna power building inside her, responding to the threat against her family, her pack, her children waiting safely back at the estate. She reached deeper into the ancient magic of this place, calling on power that had slept for generations. The stones around them blazed with silver fire, and Penelope felt herself lifting from the ground, transformation taking hold in a way she'd never experienced before. But this wasn't the partial change she'd managed before. This was full Luna manifestation, becoming one with the primal power that had once protected every werewolf pack. Energy poured through her in torrents, more than her human body was designed to contain. Penelope felt herself burning from the inside out, the Luna magic consuming her mortal flesh even as it made her more powerful than any supernatural being had been in centuries. She was becoming pure energy, pure protective force, and she could feel her physical form beginning to disintegrate. Through the blazing power, she heard Maximilian roar in fury as her light drove his pack back. She felt Sebastian's desperate love through their bond, his own strength pouring into her to keep her grounded. But it wasn't enough, the power was too vast, too ancient for her human form to survive. Then, cutting through the supernatural chaos like a silver bell, she heard Oliver's voice. "Penelope. Don't leave us. You promised you'd help me with the telescope tonight." The simple, heartfelt plea pierced through the cosmic forces threatening to tear her apart. Penelope focused on that young voice, on the love and trust it carried, and felt herself pulling back from the brink of complete dissolution. "Second Mom," Oliver called again, and those two words anchored Penelope to the physical world more powerfully than any magic. Second Mom. Not replacement for his birth mother, but something new and precious, a chosen bond that transcended blood and biology. Penelope felt herself solidifying around that love, the Luna power settling into new patterns within her changed body. Maximilian was staggering now, his claiming mark cracking under the assault of Penelope's purified power. The dark veins that had been poisoning her were burning away like shadows before dawn, his supernatural tether severing with a sound like breaking glass. "Impossible," Maximilian gasped. "The claiming magic is absolute." "Not against the pure Luna heritage," Penelope said, her voice resonating with ancient authority. "You stole a corrupted version of our power, Maximilian. But you never understood what makes us truly strong." She gestured, and the golden light surrounding her condensed into a single blazing point. "We protect. We heal. We choose love over power." The energy lance struck Maximilian in the chest, and Penelope felt his stolen Luna abilities burning away. Without the corrupted power he'd built his empire on, he was just another alpha, strong, but not invincible. Sebastian was on him in an instant, 3 years of grief and fury channeled into a display of alpha dominance that left Maximilian broken and defeated on the ancient stones. As the immediate threat ended, Penelope felt her transformation begin to fade. But something was different now, the Luna power had changed her permanently. She could feel that her ability to fully shift between forms was gone, burned away by the cosmic forces she'd channeled. But her healing abilities, her gift for calming and protecting, remained stronger than ever. "Penelope?" Sebastian was beside her instantly as she collapsed to her knees, exhausted but alive. "I'm all right," she whispered. "Different, but all right." Oliver broke free from the pack members who'd been protecting him and ran to her side, Sophia close behind. Both children threw their arms around her, and Penelope felt their love completing her in ways no magic ever could. "You stayed," Oliver whispered against her shoulder. "You didn't leave us." "Never," Penelope promised, holding both children close. "I'm never leaving my family again." 6 months later. Penelope stood in the renovated east wing of Raven's Hollow estate, watching through the large windows as Oliver patiently explained star charts to a group of supernatural children ranging in age from 6 to 12. Some were werewolf cubs who processed the world differently than their packmates, others were young witches or fae children whose gifts made traditional schooling impossible. All of them had found refuge here at the Raven's Hollow Sanctuary, where their differences were celebrated rather than corrected. The Andromeda Galaxy is so far away that the light we're seeing tonight left there 2.5 million years ago, Oliver was saying, his confidence with the other children a joy to witness. "We're literally looking back in time." A small girl with pointed ears, a half-fae child whose emotional regulation difficulties had gotten her expelled from 3 supernatural schools, raised her hand eagerly. "So if aliens in Andromeda have telescopes, they'd see Earth before humans existed?" "Exactly." Oliver beamed. "They'd see dinosaurs and prehistoric forests." "Isn't that amazing?" Penelope smiled, her hand drifting unconsciously to her still flat stomach where new life was beginning to grow. Sebastian's child, conceived in love and already showing signs of inherited Luna sensitivity to emotional currents. "Admiring your star pupil?" Sebastian's arms came around her from behind, his warmth a constant comfort in her life now. "I'm admiring all of them," Penelope said softly. "Look how they're thriving when someone believes in their potential instead of trying to fix their differences." Through the window, they could see Sophia leading a nature walk for the younger children, her natural empathy and gift with animals making her a perfect junior counselor. She'd adapted to their supernatural family with the resilience of childhood, embracing her role as big sister to every child who came to the sanctuary. "Speaking of thriving," Sebastian murmured against her ear, "how are you feeling about tomorrow?" Tomorrow. Their mating ceremony, the formal celebration they'd planned once Maximilian's threat was eliminated and Penelope's powers had stabilized. It would blend human traditions with werewolf customs, a reflection of their blended family and the new kind of pack they were building. "Nervous," Penelope admitted. Happy. Excited. Terrified. All at once. Good, Sebastian said with satisfaction. That means it matters. Penelope turned in his arms, marveling again at the man he'd become over these past months. The distant, grief-stricken Alpha had transformed into a present, patient father who understood that strength came in many forms. His relationship with Oliver had blossomed once he'd stopped trying to make his son fit traditional expectations and started appreciating the brilliant, sensitive boy he actually was. Any regrets? Sebastian asked quietly. About the powers you lost in the final battle? Penelope considered the question seriously. She missed the ability to fully transform, missed the raw power that had once flowed through her. But in exchange, her healing and calming abilities had deepened beyond anything the ancient Luna wolves had achieved. She could ease emotional trauma with a touch, could help the most distressed child find peace within minutes. No regrets, she said finally. I became exactly what I was meant to be. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Mrs. Pemberton appeared in the doorway, her usually stern expression softened by affection. The flowers for tomorrow have arrived, she announced. And there's a small situation with the wedding cake that needs Penelope's attention. Penelope laughed. What kind of situation? The kind that involves a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old who thought the cake needed astronomical improvements, Mrs. Pemberton said dryly. Penelope and Sebastian exchanged looks of amused resignation. Sophia and Oliver had been inseparable since the sanctuary opened, their shared understanding of being different, creating a sibling bond that warmed Penelope's heart daily. They found the children in the kitchen, covered in blue frosting and surrounded by what appeared to be a very ambitious attempt to recreate the constellation Cassiopeia on the wedding cake. We're making it beautiful, Sophia announced, her face streaked with edible glitter. It's scientifically accurate, Oliver added seriously. Each star is positioned according to proper celestial coordinates. Penelope looked at their creation, the elegant white cake now decorated with blue frosting stars and silver dragées arranged in perfect astronomical precision, and felt her heart overflow with love. It's perfect, she said, and meant it completely. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the September air crisp with the promise of autumn. Penelope stood before the mirror in her childhood bedroom, now transformed into a bridal suite, wearing her grandmother's vintage lace dress altered to incorporate werewolf ceremonial symbols. Sophia and Oliver flanked her like an honor guard, both dressed in matching outfits that declared them equally important in this union. Sophia wore a soft blue dress that complemented her dark curls, while Oliver looked handsome and grown up in his small suit. Ready? Sophia asked, her young face serious with the responsibility of being co-maid of honor. More than ready, Penelope replied, taking each child's hand. The ceremony took place in the estate's formal garden, transformed for the occasion with hundreds of white roses and fairy lights that would twinkle like stars as evening fell. Grandmother Willow officiated, her ancient voice carrying the weight of tradition as she spoke words in the old language that bound not just Penelope and Sebastian, but their entire blended family. When they exchanged rings, simple bands inscribed with constellation patterns that Oliver had helped design, Penelope felt the rightness of this moment in every cell of her being. This was what she'd been moving toward her entire life, even when she hadn't understood the path. The Luna and her Alpha, Grandmother Willow announced to the assembled pack members and human friends, united in love that transcends tradition, creating something new and beautiful from the best of both worlds. The kiss that sealed their bond tasted of promises and starlight, of healing and hope and the certainty that love really could conquer any darkness. Later, as the reception wound down and the children fell asleep in chairs decorated with trailing ribbons, Penelope and Sebastian stole away to the garden's quiet edge. Mrs. Raven's Hollow, Sebastian said softly, testing out her new name. I like the sound of that, Penelope replied, settling into his arms under the canopy of stars. Any thoughts on what comes next? Penelope considered the question, thinking of the sanctuary that was already receiving requests from supernatural families across the country, of the child growing beneath her heart, of Oliver's emerging alpha abilities that would need careful guidance, of Sophia's own developing gifts. Next, she said finally, we build something better than what came before. A place where every child knows they're loved exactly as they are. A pack that values wisdom over tradition, healing over power. And us? Sebastian asked. What about our own happily ever after? Penelope looked up at the stars Oliver had taught her to navigate, at the constellations that had guided her family home to each other, and smiled. I think, she said softly, our story is just beginning. In the distance, she could hear Oliver stirring, probably waking from dreams of distant galaxies to check that his new family was still safe and whole. Soon Sophia would wake too, and they'd all go inside together to tuck the children in properly before beginning their first night as an officially united family. Penelope Ravens Hollow, Luna of the Shadow Ridge Pack, director of the Ravens Hollow Sanctuary, mother to 2 extraordinary children with a third on the way, felt the contentment of a woman who had found her true purpose. She had started this journey as a desperate single mother looking for any job that would keep her and Sophia housed and fed. She was ending it as the heart of a revolutionary new kind of family, one built on love rather than blood, acceptance rather than conformity, strength that came from embracing differences rather than hiding them. As Sebastian's arms tightened around her and she felt their unborn child flutter with the first stirrings of life, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she belonged. Under the stars, surrounded by love, home at last. Epilogue. 3 years later. Penelope woke to the sound of whispered voices and muffled giggles outside her bedroom door. Through the pre-dawn darkness, she could make out Oliver's patient tone explaining something to his younger siblings, followed by Sophia's enthusiastic agreement and baby Luna's delighted babbling. They're planning something, Sebastian murmured against her hair, his arm tightening around her waist. It's your birthday, Penelope said with a smile. Of course they're planning something. At 37, Sebastian had finally learned to accept that being celebrated didn't make him weak, a lesson their children had taught him with persistent love and elaborate homemade gifts. This year, Penelope suspected, would be no different. The bedroom door crept open, and 3 faces peered around the edge. Oliver, now 11 and tall for his age, carried 18-month-old Luna on his hip while Sophia, 10 and radiating excitement, held a carefully balanced breakfast tray. Happy birthday, Father, Oliver said formally, then broke into a grin. We made pancakes. They're only slightly burned. I helped. Luna announced proudly, clapping her chubby hands. At 18 months, she was already showing signs of inherited Luna sensitivity, able to calm any crying child at the sanctuary with her infectious giggles. Penelope sat up, making room as their children piled onto the bed with the enthusiasm of a pack of puppies. Luna immediately crawled to Sebastian, her dark eyes, so like his, sparkling with mischief as she offered him a slobbery piece of pancake from her tiny fist. For Papa, she said solemnly, one of her first clear phrases. Sebastian's face softened as he accepted the offering with appropriate gravity. Thank you, little moon. It's perfect. There's more, Sophia said, bouncing with anticipation. Show him, Oliver. Oliver reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden object that made Penelope's breath catch. It was a telescope, carved by hand with intricate detail, sized perfectly for a child's hands. I made it in workshop class, Oliver said, suddenly shy. For Luna. I thought, when she's old enough, maybe we could all look at stars together. All of us. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. Oliver had been attending the local high school part-time this year, his exceptional intelligence finally being challenged appropriately while the sanctuary remained his emotional home base. Watching him gain confidence in both worlds had been one of her greatest joys. It's beautiful, son, Sebastian said quietly, examining the craftsmanship. Your mother would be proud of the man you're becoming. The easy mention of Isabella no longer brought pain to any of them. Oliver had filled the library with pictures of his birth mother alongside photos of their current family, understanding that love wasn't diminished by being shared across time and space. Speaking of stars, Sophia said with elaborate casualness, there's going to be a meteor shower tonight. Perfect timing for a birthday celebration. Penelope hid her smile. Their children had inherited their father's tactical mind when it came to planning family events. What an amazing coincidence, Sebastian said solemnly. The day unfolded with the comfortable chaos of a house full of children and purpose. The sanctuary was buzzing with activity as usual, 12 children currently in residence, ranging from a 5-year-old Selkie who was learning to control her water-shifting abilities to a teenager with ADHD whose supernatural hearing made traditional classrooms impossible. Penelope found herself in her office that afternoon, reviewing applications from families seeking placement for their children. Each file represented a story of struggle and hope, parents desperate to find somewhere their different children could thrive. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Imogen Whitmore, no relation to Mrs. Pemberton, poked her head inside. The young developmental psychologist had joined their staff 6 months ago, bringing expertise in both supernatural psychology and neurodivergent support. Penelope? The Hartwell family is here for their tour. Penelope nodded, closing the files. The Hartwells were considering the sanctuary for their 8-year-old son, a young phoenix whose emotional regulation difficulties had led to several small fires at his previous school. She found the family in the main hall, their son hiding behind his mother's legs while Oliver knelt at his eye level, speaking in the gentle tone he developed for frightened newcomers. "The first time I transformed, I accidentally broke 3 windows," Oliver was saying conversationally. "Scared myself so badly I didn't shift again for 2 months. But Penelope taught me that sometimes our powers get bigger when our feelings do, and that's normal." The little boy peeked out with interest. "You broke windows?" "With my alpha roar," Oliver confirmed seriously. "Much louder than I expected. But now I can control it because I practice and because everyone here understands that learning takes time." Penelope watched the careful way Oliver approached the child, never rushing, never overwhelming, always letting the newcomer set the pace. It was a skill he'd learned through his own struggles and now shared naturally with others. The tour went beautifully, the Hartwells clearly impressed by the children's obvious happiness and the staff's genuine understanding of supernatural development. By the time they left, little Phoenix Hartwell was asking when he could come back to try the big telescope. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, the entire sanctuary family gathered on the estate's back lawn. Someone had strung fairy lights between the trees, and Mrs. Pemberton had outdone herself with a feast that accommodated every dietary need from the Selkie's requirement for sea salt to the young vampire's carefully prepared synthetic blood supplements. Sebastian sat in the center of it all, Luna on his lap and an expression of wonder on his face as if he still couldn't quite believe this life was real. Penelope remembered the cold, distant man she'd first met and marveled at the transformation love had wrought. "Speech!" Sophia called out, and the other children took up the chant. Sebastian stood slowly, Luna still in his arms, and looked around at the faces illuminated by starlight and fairy lights, staff members who'd become family, children who'd found their place in the world, friends from both the human and supernatural communities who'd embraced their unconventional sanctuary. 3 years ago, he said quietly, I thought strength meant standing alone. I thought protecting my family meant keeping everyone at a distance. His eyes found Penelope's across the gathering. I was wrong about a lot of things. Luna reached up to pat his cheek, and he smiled down at her before continuing. This place, this family we've built together, it's taught me that real strength comes from connection. Real protection comes from love that's freely given and received. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for showing me what it means to be truly home. Penelope felt tears streaming down her cheeks as the gathered group erupted in applause and cheers. Around her, she saw the same emotion reflected in every face, the wonder of belonging somewhere completely. Later, after the younger children had been tucked into bed and the teenagers were absorbed in a movie in the recreation room, Penelope found herself on the observatory deck Sebastian had built for Oliver's 9th birthday. The telescope Oliver had given Luna sat beside the larger equipment, a promise of shared wonder to come. Regrets? Sebastian asked, settling beside her with 2 cups of hot chocolate. It had become their ritual question, asked periodically as they built this new life together. Tonight, Penelope considered it seriously as she always did. No regrets, she said finally. Even the hard parts led us here. Through the glass doors, they could see Oliver helping Sophia with a science project while Luna played with blocks on the carpet nearby. The scene was so perfectly domestic, so beautifully normal, that it took Penelope's breath away. What are you thinking about? Sebastian asked softly. the first night I arrived here. How terrified I was, how desperate. I thought I was taking a job to survive until we could figure out something better. Penelope leaned into his warmth. I had no idea I was coming home. Home, Sebastian repeated, testing the word like he still couldn't quite believe it applied to him. Look, Oliver called from inside, and they turned to see him pointing toward the window. The meteor shower's starting. They went outside together, their children joining them on the lawn where blankets had been spread for optimal stargazing. Luna settled happily in Penelope's lap while Sophia and Oliver took turns with the telescopes, calling out each streak of light across the sky. Make a wish, Luna, Sophia instructed as a particularly bright meteor blazed overhead. Luna clapped her hands with delight, then looked seriously at the stars. Wish for more pancakes. The practical wish sent everyone into fits of laughter, and Penelope felt her heart swell with the simple perfection of the moment. What about you? Oliver asked Penelope. What's your wish? Penelope looked around at her family, chosen and born, human and supernatural, conventional and beautifully strange, and realized she had everything she'd ever dared to dream of. I wish, she said softly, for more nights exactly like this one. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns while meteors painted silver trails across the darkness. In the distance, the sanctuary slept peacefully, children who'd once felt lost and different now dreaming safely under the same sky that had once seemed so lonely. Penelope closed her eyes and felt the Luna power humming contentedly in her veins, no longer a source of fear or confusion, but simply part of who she was. Wife, mother, protector, healer. Woman who'd found her place in the world by making space for others to find theirs. When she opened her eyes, Sebastian was watching her with the expression of amazement he still wore sometimes, as if she were a miracle he'd never expected to receive. I love you, he said simply. I love you too, she replied. All of you. Always. The meteor shower continued overhead, filling the night with wonder while the Raven's Hollow family made wishes and shared dreams under stars that had guided them all safely home to each other. And in the morning, there would be pancakes. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.